Delegates Lounge. Pull up a chair. I'm Alex Tarquinio, a journalist based at the United Nations here in New York City, and your MC for this podcast, featuring some of the most influential minds in the world today. Settle in for some riveting tete-a-tete, available wherever you listen to podcasts. Welcome back. Today, we're bringing you our conversation with Asim Iftikhar Ahmad, Pakistan's permanent representative to the United Nations. Pakistan is serving in the monthly rotating presidency of the Security Council for July. Typically a quiet month here in Turtle Bay, the Manhattan neighborhood with the UN headquarters. But not this year. That's because a high-level conference to discuss a two-state solution for Israel and Palestine, an agenda item that takes us back 8 decades to the founding of the UN itself, was postponed in June amidst the 12-day Israel-Iran war. The conference, which is being organized by France and Saudi Arabia, has been rescheduled at the end of this month. There was some chatter that Pakistan might push back its signature Security Council events, focused on multilateralism and on the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, with its 57 member states, to coincide with the conference. But those will go ahead next week. So foreign dignitaries will need to choose which events to attend in New York or rack up frequent flyer miles. Although the hallways of the UN headquarters will be more crowded than usual this summer, there's little anticipation of any diplomatic outcomes. One UN diplomat noted that when they were planning a summer conference to discuss the creation of a Palestinian state, they thought there would be a Gaza ceasefire by now. The conference was pushed back because of last month's strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. Pakistan swiftly criticized the U.S. bombing in Iran, joining China and Russia in their official condemnation. As a nuclear state, Pakistan is not a signatory to the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty, but the ambassador says that Iran, as a signatory, should abide by it. His most ardent remarks relate to the recent Pakistan-India conflict over Kashmir. Pakistan has nominated President Donald Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize for his role in concluding a ceasefire. Regarding Ukraine, Pakistan abstained on UN General Assembly resolutions calling on Russia to leave Ukraine until a recent twist in February. Of course, the real mystery here this month is whether the new U.S. ambassador will finally arrive. Ambassador Ahmed and I spoke before the Senate confirmation hearing of Mike Waltz on Tuesday. Waltz's arrival might break the sense of malaise in Turtle Bay. Ambassador Ahmed's diplomatic career spans more than 3 decades. Before becoming his country's top envoy in New York, he served as its ambassador to France and Monaco and delegate to UNESCO, which is based in Paris. He previously served in several key assignments in Geneva and New York, where he has worked in his country's mission to the UN at various times over the last 2 decades. Here's our conversation. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us in the Delegates Lounge, especially during the month where you have the presidency of the Security Councils. Thank you so much for making time for us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Well, let's dive right into the top-level UN conference being co-chaired by France and Saudi Arabia. It was postponed in June at the outbreak of the Israel-Iran war. As French President Emmanuel Macron said at the time, it was postponed for, quote, logistical and security reasons.
Yeah, so it's not for me as president of the council to really elaborate on that. I can elaborate some of the aspects because you know that this conference is a GA conference. So it's being dealt as a follow-up of a General Assembly resolution that called for such a conference. And you know that Saudi Arabia and France are co-leading that effort. Without going into details here about what has happened in Gaza, obviously the entire international community knows what's happening there, and there is a certain very immediate need to urgently have the ceasefire in place and to provide the humanitarian assistance, improve the situation. But beyond that, everyone has been saying that there must be a revival of the political process. That larger political horizon about Palestine has to be there. So what this conference was aiming to do was to actually to revive that process, to have that larger discussion. That there are several tracks, sub roundtables in which different things are being discussed. So they are focusing on the peace and security, on the political track, on what should be done on the humanitarian and reconstruction side. What about the respect for international law? What kind of narrative should be built around durable peace and stability objectives in the Middle East? And then Palestinian statehood, two-state concept. How do we take it forward? The question of recognitions, more recognitions, assisting the new Palestinian state, economically, financially, all that means bringing the entire weight of the international community behind this idea and to commit tangibly political, economic, financial support to take this forward. This is very, very important because otherwise this cycle of conflict that is there, the recurring situations that are unbearable, we won't be able to address that. There is a clear understanding among the majority of the membership, including the membership in the Security Council, that we need to move forward on Palestinian statehood and the two-state solution.
As you know, Netanyahu has just visited Washington and he left without any ceasefire deal. So we're really not even at the initial stage of winding down the conflict. Does it make sense to be discussing longer-term political solutions when, in fact, there are perhaps shorter-term necessities that need to be dealt with?
We understand that the talks are ongoing, and perhaps we're very close to another ceasefire, being announced. But still, that will bring, a temporary respite and also enable the humanitarian assistance to go in. But there are other questions about, a permanent end to the war in Gaza. And then, as I said earlier, to move beyond all of this and to really address the real underlying issue in the Middle East, which is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which revolves around, the establishment of the independent Palestinian state as part of the two-state solution, which is, everyone is saying, this is the only viable way of attaining durable peace and stability in the Middle East. So those who are at the moment, not going along with this or opposing this, I think there is a need for others who are supporting to try to engage them more proactively and to convince them and to bring them back, because this is something that they had previously, agreed to. I mean, a two-state solution was not something that, came from nowhere. It has been an agreed way to address the situation in the Middle East that was agreeable at a point of time.
Well, in fact, there were very specific proposals, but then, of course, the Palestinians declared the Second Intifada. So are we talking about a two-state solution on the lines of what was discussed before the Second Intifada, or are the discussions moving in a different direction? I mean, or are they even that advanced?
Well, the majority of the members of the international community, when they talk of a Palestinian state, they talk about, pre-1967, borders. Obviously, the details will be agreed as part of the negotiation process, but as a principle, you have to agree and, to move in that direction. I think this is what the international two-state, coalition and this conference is trying to achieve.
Well, there were really specific, and I don't know how, I'm not here to discuss how realistic they were, but there were specific, like there would be a high-speed rail connection or something between two parts of a Palestinian state. I mean, was this conference going to get that much, or do you envision it getting that much into details of what a two-state solution would look like, or is it just to set a framework for discussion?
No, I don't know. I mean, obviously there is talk about how to make the future state contiguous. But if you look at the the eight roundtables, which are dealing with different aspects, as I mentioned, security, humanitarian, reconstruction, international law, economic assistance, all of that. So there you will see there are elements, because the idea behind this discussion was that it's not only statements, and countries bring in tangible commitments, how they are actually going to support this entire exercise. In terms that can be in terms of political support, recognition, and those who have not recognized, and other kind of support in having the new state and its institutions being strengthened.
Iran's nuclear program, Pakistan had a very swift response to the U.S. strikes against Iran's nuclear program, swiftly condemned the strikes, calling them deeply disturbing. And Pakistan is also simultaneously maintaining diplomatic engagement with Iran and representing Tehran's interests in Washington. How does your country balance its relations with the United States and Iran?
Well, in some ways it's not that easy, but in other ways it enables us. It is possible for us to do that because, first of all, Pakistan is a country that that does not shy away from taking positions which are based on principle, which are based on charter and international law. So that provides you basis and cover, and you've seen that we've done that consistently. So we thought that, I mean, it should have been stated that way, the way we stated our position with regard to the attacks on the civilian nuclear sites in Iran. That's very clear. But at the same time, and this has been our position for over many years, that the Iranian nuclear issue, the only viable way to resolve it is through dialogue and diplomacy, and it was the only way. Still, people are saying that this is the only way. So that process has been disrupted at different occasions, and the most recent one was, it was very good that President Trump had restarted that dialogue with Iran with the view to peacefully resolving. And in the midst of that, the attacks were undertaken, which has actually not only disrupted the dialogue, it's also brought in an element of mistrust. So our position is very clear. We believe that this should be addressed through dialogue, through negotiations, and then when there is an agreement, and there was an agreement previously, the JCPOA, then it should be all parties are under obligation to carry out their respective commitments. So that's very important. That's what we have been saying.
Does your government have an official position on Iran's nuclear program?
Yeah, this has been stated so many times in the council, elsewhere. What's our position on JCPOA 2231? And as I was stating, that we want this to be resolved through negotiations and implementation of respective obligations and responsibilities.
But as a nuclear power and a non-signatory of the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty, can Pakistan argue in the Security Council for Iran to honor its commitments under the Non-Proliferation Treaty?
These are commitments that we are not a party. I mean, obviously, for our own reasons, because we think that this was discriminatory and puts unequal obligations on member states. But Iran is a party, and so there are respective obligations and responsibilities and rights also. And then there was the JCPOA, under which again there are rights and obligations. So all we are saying is that this was something that was agreed between Iran and the other parties, and all of them should be respecting
So those countries that are signatories of the NPT should respect their obligations, right? Now, switching to Afghanistan, General Michael Kurilla, commander of U.S. Central Command, recently praised Pakistan's counterterrorism efforts before the House Armed Services Committee, focusing on its role combating ISIS Khorasan and calling you a phenomenal partner. Obviously, public praise is always nice to hear, is what I'm getting at. But how does Pakistan balance its military relationship with both the United States and China, because your military procures from both, has fighter jets from both, and also fighting counterterrorism in your region?
Well, these are things that are interlinked, although very often it has been stated publicly and this is not the first time that the US has acknowledged publicly and at very high levels the cooperation that has been there between US and Pakistan on counterterrorism, intelligence, all of that, and it has run through years. So they know this very well, and the international community is also aware of that very well. And even more than that, when we have those dialogues, when we have that interaction, that deeper, discussion, this understanding and this acknowledgement is even bigger. But from time to time, they also express this publicly, which is good. It's important to do that. And as far as the larger picture is concerned, Pakistan has a very clear position that when it comes to the major powers, including the P5 and particularly China and the US, we want balanced, objective, multifaceted relationships with all of them. That's our stated position, and we are very committed to pursue that. So you can see that sometimes the nature of relationship could be different, but our objective is the same. So this is in that spirit that we want to advance our partnership and relationship with the US and China.
Well, Pakistan has a stated foreign policy goal of multipolarity, but how do you balance that, for example, with the requirements of the UN Charter? We talked about the NPT, but also if one of these countries that you have a relationship with is out of the Charter or asks you to support them on a resolution, how do you maintain, which comes first? Your multipolarity, not getting in between, say, great powers like the US and China, or the UN Charter?
Well, I think UN Charter, not only for Pakistan, but for every country, should be the overriding thing. It's just not sometimes the case, but for us, it's very clear. So I don't see any situation in which we have extended support to a major country going against the requirements or provisions of the Charter. We don't do that, and I don't think we'll ever do that. That's why I said in the other part of the conversation that we are very much attached to the UN Charter, to the respect for international law, and our positions on key issues are mostly based on that, and that provides us that strength. And Pakistan itself, it's a big country. We are known to have followed over the years foreign policy which is independent, sovereign, our own decisions. You recall, and not only recently, 2003, the Iraq, the whole episode, we were in the Security Council. We did not support that.
In the famous meeting, the presentation.
Not only that, we were not part, we did not extend support for, the resolution that at that time the US wanted to initiate military action. So we are known as a country that has its own positions based on principle, and then we can withstand pressure in maintaining those positions.
Well, I did want to touch on one other conflict in Ukraine, simply because you mentioned balancing multipolarity with the UN Charter. Pakistan abstained on the votes in the General Assembly, calling on Russia to withdraw from Ukraine. And you abstained, I have to say, both on the votes themselves and also the amendments brought by Russia. Here again, how do you balance your desire as a country to maintain good relations with the U.S., Russia, China, and other regional players with, a clear violation of the UN Charter?
Yeah, I mean, you have to read into our statements and explanations of vote. I mean, you cannot just assume that since it was an abstention, so it was on one side or the other. So our explanations and positions have been very clear that, we cannot condone violations of international law and charter and the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states, and the principle of equal security for all states. So that's very clearly defined. Our main position on this was it should never have happened. Diplomacy should have been, given prioritized. It could have been prevented. I think we have to look into all those reasons that led to this, the outbreak of this conflict. So our position has been that it has impacted not only the region, not only the Europeans, but the wider international community, especially the developing countries. And what we were saying at that time, now almost everyone is saying that there's no military solution to this. There must be a diplomatic solution, arrived through dialogue and diplomacy, starting with an immediate cessation of hostilities. So that was our position at that time, which we have consistently maintained. The only difference was, this resolution, the short resolution that the U.S. brought in February, simultaneously in the GA and the Security Council, which was leaving the details aside, but calling for two main things basically, a swift end to conflict and a peaceful settlement, which was largely in line with what Pakistan has been saying. End the conflict, ceasefire and peaceful settlement. And so it was, in line with our stated position. So that's why we said we are able to support this. And so we did that, and we did that clearly, and we explained our position. And we still believe that this issue, there are security, humanitarian, other consequences of this conflict, economic consequences. This must be brought to an end. We hope that things move in that direction.
Well, in fact, that was a resolution that Russia did not veto because, obviously Ukraine, I should point out, had a competing resolution and felt that the U.S. resolution had been watered down somewhat. But that is one that you felt it was middle of the road enough that Pakistan could support it, in other words.
Yeah, because we supported this principle. And what this was saying was in line with what we have been saying all along.
I did want to touch on Kashmir. Obviously, this is one that you were directly involved with. It's also almost as old as the UN itself. In that sense, it's like the Palestinian question and has not been resolved, recently flared up. First of all, how likely do you think the ceasefire is to hold? And also, Pakistan nominated Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize in June, citing his decisive diplomatic intervention in the Kashmir conflict. And can you talk a little bit about why you did that?
So there are three things in this. One, you mentioned the recent conflict, which is totally, something that happened unwarranted, without any justification, total violation of international law and the UN Charter. So India committed an aggression. We showed that we are a country that not only could absorb that aggression, we were able to respond to it in accordance with the right to self-defense. And the results are there for the international community to see and to analyze. A lot is being discussed about what happened on the night of 6th and 7th, the aerial combat and all of that. Not here to go into the details because the defense analysts are analyzing all of that. But we showed that Pakistan is, has the capability to deter aggression and to protect its sovereignty and territorial integrity. So that's one. The other thing is that why does this happen? So, this doesn't happen in vacuum. This recurring cycle of conflict, maybe at a smaller scale, in the India-Pakistan context, in the South Asia context. You mentioned Kashmir. So that's where, that's the larger picture. That's the canvas. So you look at the region, Kashmir, just like Palestine in the Middle East, Jammu and Kashmir is the issue that is the core dispute between India and Pakistan that has remained unresolved because India has refused to implement the Security Council resolutions that provided for self-determination for the Kashmiri people. And they are waging that struggle, which is being suppressed by violation of human rights and, so many actions. So the entire situation is unstable. It has also blocked that real normalization, the kind of relationship with two big countries like India and Pakistan should have in the region, to promote peace and development. And that would bring, larger prosperity to the region. So that's what we are saying, that if we want to end this cycle and if we want durable peace and stability in the region, it's very important to address and resolve the Jammu and Kashmir dispute. So now in all of this, you saw that so there was this 4-day conflict, and in the end there was a ceasefire, in which the US, together with some other friendly countries, they played a key role, which we have appreciated and acknowledged and thanked. And you would have seen the role played by the Secretary General also, and the statements that came in the wake of the ceasefire. So two main things were there. One, welcoming the ceasefire and, expecting that no more escalation. And the second thing, which the Americans also said very clearly, you saw the statement of Marco Rubio, that India and Pakistan have also agreed to meet at a neutral venue to discuss their outstanding issues. So the main thing is that it was not just the ceasefire, but the expectation. The Secretary General also made a similar statement while welcoming the ceasefire, that they expect that the two countries will have a dialogue. So if you look at it, Pakistan also acknowledged the efforts that went into ceasefire. We also welcomed that, there is this broader recognition that, going forward, there must be a dialogue between India and Pakistan to resolve the outstanding issues, and Kashmir is the core issue. But if you look at the other side, there is a state of denial. So first you do aggression, that, you go running for a ceasefire, you get the ceasefire, and then you say, we don't want to acknowledge who played a role in bringing about that ceasefire. And then you also say, you go beyond that and you say that, there is no agreement to have a dialogue with Pakistan. So denial on both fronts, which in my view is not, a good, responsible position. I believe that our friends in India, they should recognize that two big countries like India and Pakistan cannot remain in this state of not even sitting across the table and talking to each other and trying to address their issues. So that's why I think it was important what the Secretary General was saying, what many other friends were saying around the world, the role that the US played. I think it was very critical, and President Trump has been saying this. He's repeated that. I don't even remember the count. He's repeated that on so many occasions. We believe that this was a genuine effort towards peace.
So, and I should say, because India is not part of the conversation, they have described their Operation Sindoor as being a security measure and counterterrorism. And also, as you allude to, they do give less credit, publicly at least, to the Trump administration for brokering the ceasefire than Pakistan, which is given the Trump administration obviously a lot of credit. A Nobel Prize nomination.
No, I think you said rightly. They're not part of this conversation, but we are very willing to have that conversation because I mean, nowhere in the international law or under any provisions of Security Council or General Assembly resolutions regarding counterterrorism does give anyone, any country, anywhere in the world, this right to to say that some incident happens, and you just say that you're saying someone else is to be blamed, and then you violate all tenets of international law and the council, even the Security Council resolutions and the statements that are there on how counterterrorism efforts should be or must be undertaken by the international community. It says very clearly it has to be within the ambit of international law and international humanitarian law and human rights law and respective obligations. So there is no, blank check to anyone, and Pakistan can never accept, no country can accept that you enter into that blame game without any evidence, without any investigation, and then openly commit aggression against a neighboring country, and then try to justify it. There is no justification for that. So we have I think we have been able to counter that in all dimensions. First, it was illegal, unwarranted, no justification under international law. Pakistan had the right to self-defense, and we exercised that right to self-defense. And we did that very carefully and cautiously and proportionately. So there is a clear difference in the behavior of the two countries.
Should the UN be playing a greater role in this, or does it make sense to have the U.S. take the lead, given that it has good relations with both countries?
We've been saying whether it's. I mean, UN has a definite role, and they should be playing this role. Whether it's the Secretary General or the permanent members of the Security Council, they know the history, they know the historical context of the Kashmir dispute. It is their responsibility, to try to resolve that situation. But Pakistan's position has been very clear that, we are very open to any kind of role, good offices from the Secretary General or our common friends who wish to, play that role in bringing the two countries together, at least to sit across the table and discuss. So we are very open. It's the other side which has always refuted this, and they don't agree to any UN role, they don't agree to any third country facilitation or mediation. So it's a position that is very hard to understand. I don't know how they are able to explain this. On the one hand, they refuse any UN or third country role, and they tell them we and this is a bilateral issue which we will discuss with Pakistan bilaterally. And on the other hand, they have suspended the bilateral dialogue with Pakistan for many, many years now. So, this is something that's totally incomprehensible. But now I think there is increased awareness among our friends. Where does the problem lie?
The UN 80 initiative, looking at efficiencies and reorganization, but also cost cutting because of the well-known budget crisis at the UN. For example, coming up here today, I noticed it looks like they're actually working on the escalator, but the escalator has been out for many months. Journalists often put this in articles about the UN budget crisis, which is kind of funny because it directly impacts us. It's actually the escalator that connects the Security Council, where we come to your stakeouts, and the offices where we file our stories from. So that's been out for many, many months. It'd be very nice if it's fixed. But on a more serious note, we're actually looking at it, maybe even 20% budget cuts at the Secretariat. And at a recent briefing, they said that wouldn't be applied across the board. It might be less in some departments. What is the sentiment among Security Council members about the budget and the future of the United Nations?
Well, there are so many broader questions involved, and you mentioned the issue of the elevators. I think there are some other things that have been mentioned. Some ambassadors have been telling me ever since I came there. It used to be a very good restaurant on the fourth floor, which is no more there. So yeah, but
that affects you more than us. We focus on what affects the journalist.
I believe everyone is taking this UN80 initiative from the Secretary General in good stride, I would say, for the main reason that the general membership believes that UN is a big organization. And like any good organization, effective organization, you have to evolve with time. So reform, adaptation according to the challenges is a natural phenomenon. And the things that should drive this reform are effectiveness and efficiencies. Cost cutting is part of it, but actually you should be aiming for effectiveness and efficiency. So the overall objective should be that as a result of this exercise, you have a UN that is stronger than what it is today. So that's why we've been saying that we should build on the previous reform exercises that have been held. And one of the main things that have emerged from the discussions, from the interactions with the Secretary General, is that it should not impact some of the pillars. So we have three basic pillars defined for the UN. This is peace and security, development, and human rights. So almost everyone is saying that none of them should be impacted disproportionately. So I'm not going to enter into the debate because you know that many of the developing countries, they want that the development pillar should stay strong or it should not be impacted. In my view, all three should be taken together forward. So for the moment, it has been informal. There was a letter from the Secretary General. He described the three streams on which things should be discussed, and some informal dialogues, interactions as a whole, also in some groups. What Pakistan has suggested that a good way to take this exercise forward would be for the Secretary General at this stage or maybe in coming days to present a report which provides a holistic picture of what he is proposing to member states, and it should be in the form of a written report comprising all three streams so that everyone knows this is being proposed, and then you take it forward the usual intergovernmental process. It will take time, obviously, but if we can initiate that discussion and if we can be on that route, many good things can be achieved.
Now, the UN80 initiative isn't only about cost cutting, but also restructuring much of the work. Now, on the Security Council, you spend a lot of time reviewing mandatory reports. Many of them were mandated decades ago. Do the Security Council members discuss this drive for efficiency? And do they feel that there are some mandated programs that should be merged or even eliminated? Is that a point of discussion among the council members?
So I would say it's not that a certain mandate has been there for many years. More important for us as member states and as the principal organs of the UN is to see what is there that is, prevented these mandates from being implemented and achieved. So, once a mandate is implemented and achieved, it will automatically, be taken away. So that's the key question. That's why I think the Secretary General is right in pointing out that let's have a discussion on the implementation of mandates.
Right. It's an excellent point. Simply because a program is mandated many years, or some of them go back almost to the beginning of the UN, doesn't mean the issue has been resolved. If the issue is unresolved, the mandate is still valid. But that gets to a deeper point, which is, are there structural issues that are perhaps preventing the resolution of some of these mandates, or is it simply that there are intractable political disagreements? And
yeah, I think it's all of that. It depends what kind of mandate we're talking about. So there are different mandates that come from the General Assembly, from ECOSOC, from the Security Council. From the Security Council, it's mostly related to the Council's work, different items which are on the agenda. So, you have the peacekeeping missions, you have the special political missions, you have reporting mandates. So these are periodic, cycles in which these things are discussed. But as I was saying, these are all important issues. And so when you are reviewing them, you obviously look at what was the rationale for these mandates. So, because if you're talking of a peace operation, what were the initial objectives? How much of these objectives have been achieved? Have you been able to take the peace and security track together with the political track, which is also very important? So all of these things should be discussed and reviewed, I would say, in a more holistic manner. That would give us an idea, where in what direction we should go.
Is there a sense that some of these should be merged? That maybe there's a lot of duplication?
Yeah, obviously the duplications would be, at the systemic level, they will be discussed there. But, when you're talking of specific individual country specific or region specific situations, I understand there wouldn't be that much of duplication. But within those missions, maybe there could be where you have different positions. For example, in a mission, if you also have a special representative and a personal envoy also, so that kind of thing. And I understand that there is a lot of, talk about the very top heavy system in the UN with high positions, a number of them, which seem to have proliferated. That's also expected to be the focus of this reform and bringing more efficiencies. Yeah.
Well, UN Security Council reform is often mentioned as part of reform, and it was a part of the Pact of the Future. What is Pakistan's position on the use of the veto? That's kind of the third rail of Security Council reform. Should the veto be reformed, and new permanent members, if any, should they have the veto?
Yeah, so this is one of the most keenly debated and followed discussions in the UN and for many years. And the main reason for that is that this issue has very high stakes for almost everyone. But if you come to the reform and how this can be achieved, Pakistan, together with our friends in the Uniting for Consensus group, we have a clearly defined position, which is based on, and which actually follows on the principles that are also described in the Pact for the Future and were described earlier also, that we want a democratic Security Council, a reform that makes it more representative and accountable to the general membership. So the main point that you mentioned, veto, which is a characteristic of the permanent members. So, there are two main characteristics. One, they have the veto, and secondly, they are permanent. And because of that, they are able to exert a position of influence in the council's proceedings, open, behind the doors. So if you follow the debate on the reform issue, one thing that comes out very clearly is a very widespread criticism of the use of veto and the special status of the permanent members, which often blocks the effective functioning of the Security Council. So we believe that if this is the main problem, that is, preventing the Security Council from time to time to carry out its role for the maintenance of international peace and security, then we will only aggravate this problem if we were to add more individual permanent members. So that's our basic argument against addition of individual permanent members to the Security Council. We have provided an alternative which is democratic, which is suggesting that we add more non-permanent or elected members, and the duration of their terms could be negotiated. It could be 3 years, 4 years.
But for longer than, I should say, for our listeners who aren't aficionados, that the current there are 10 elected members and they have 2-year terms. You're in an elected 2-year term, your country. And this is also where regionalism does come into it, because, of course, your neighbor, India, feels that given its size, of its population, it should be a permanent member and should have a veto. But the Uniting for Consensus members feel that there should be no additional permanent members, and well, certainly no new vetoes in that.
And the reasons for that, as I explained, I mean, this is the principal position, and we think that it's not because India is demanding a permanent seat, or Japan or Germany or Brazil are demanding a permanent seat. It's based on principle, because otherwise, even in our group, there are countries who have credentials that are equally good, maybe even better. So for example, what are the criteria that you suggest that you are eligible to be a permanent member? Contribution to international peace and security, peacekeeping. So Pakistan is equally good. A big population, we are not far behind. So, but that's not the point. You have Indonesia also, which is a big country, big Islamic country, together with Pakistan. So, should they be? So, this is the main argument that we are making. It's not about that capability. It's not about the realities. The realities keep on changing. I know that many of our friends, they relate to new realities. But that's what we are saying. These realities are permanently and constantly changing. The situation that we have today, it wasn't the same 20 years earlier. Look at 2005 and look at 2025. So much has changed in terms of how much a certain country was contributing financially towards the UN and what is the situation now. So it keeps on changing. That's why we are saying the new reform should be a good reform, and it should correspond, yes, to the new realities. It should make the council more democratic. It should provide opportunities for a larger group of countries who think that they have the capability and the readiness to contribute to the council's work. So they should have this opportunity to be elected and be rotated. That's why we are proposing that the new seats, whether they are 3-year seat or 4-year, 5-year seat with re-election or whatever, they should provide the opportunity for the countries of those regions to rotate on the Security Council. If you add some country, some individual country permanently, that means that permanently blocks that seat, does not provide the possibility for rotation. And we have been saying it's very clear. You look at the UN, there are certainly not 3, 4, 5, or 6 countries which have the capability and the willingness to contribute to the council. But certainly, I mean, this number would be at least 40, 50 countries. I mean, even smaller states have proven many a times that the contribution that they bring to council's work is even more significant than some of the bigger countries. And then there is whole question of the track record of various countries. So even some of the contenders, what kind of track record have they shown over the years in terms of respecting international law, in terms of even respecting the resolutions of the Security Council, of which they want to become permanent members. So, these are very valid questions that remain part of the debate.
Well, of course, all this discussion about reform will be academic if the UN runs out of money soon, which is becoming more and more of a possibility. As of July, only 114 of the 193 member states have paid their contributions in full for the year. But more importantly, the 2 largest contributors have become unreliable. I mean, China's often been paying late, and the U.S. is yet to pay for the year. Could the UN run out of money? Are we really looking at a budget crisis because of political differences within the UN?
Yeah, certainly there is a crisis, and this is what the Secretary General has been pointing out. This needs to be addressed. He's also tried to explain that, this reform initiative, the UN80, is not because of the financial crisis, but it's hard to believe that because it does look like that is having an impact. But why is he saying that? Because and in a way he's right that we are trying to do things better, but it has nothing to do with one or some members not paying, because unless that problem about not paying your dues is addressed, then whatever reform you bring in, whether it's UNAT or some other things, that won't work. So that is a separate thing that needs to be addressed. So, and I think that, there's a need for some kind of persuasion to go into this, the whole thing. Maybe a group of friends of UN or something, which should reach out to friends like the US and try to convince them that this is an organization that they themselves were the leaders in establishing. It has served the international community well. It has served the US and many other bigger countries well. And it would be in the fitness of things that, they remain committed.
Is there something you would like to sort of summarize your position on the outlook for the UN in these times?
Well, for us, it's very easy to summarize. UN is an organization whose value is very much appreciated by the large majority of its membership. We don't see any alternative at the moment. It has served us and the international community very well across the three pillars. The main thing is that everyone acknowledges that these are interlinked global challenges, which no country has the capability, to address alone, or not even, a group of countries can handle them alone. It's only through constructive multilateralism that you can address. I believe that's the philosophy of the majority of the member states, to support multilateralism, to support and strengthen the hands of the Secretary General, and we'll do all we can to keep this organization going, to keep that San Francisco spirit going. And our expectation is that UN will emerge stronger from this difficult phase. And it's not the first time that we are facing such challenges to the international order and to the UN. Thank you.
Well, that's an extremely optimistic note to conclude our conversation on, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you for joining us today in the Delegates Lounge.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And that's it from the Delegates Lounge. We'd like to thank our esteemed guests who've graciously allowed us to share their hard-earned insights into what really matters. And then there's you, our listeners, who we hope are sufficiently edified to clamour for more of the same. Do drop in for a weekly episode on Thursday or from time to time if we're on the road for special events, in which case there'll be a bonus episode. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you like what you've heard, please take a moment to rate or review the show, as it helps others who share your abiding interest in world affairs to find their way to the Delegates Lounge. You can connect with us on many popular social media platforms or reach out to us directly at info@thedelegateslounge.com. We're a small team, so we can't respond to every message, but we will read them. Our show this week was written and produced by the host and by yours truly, executive producer Frank Radford. Until next time, keep calm and curious.